Peter Dutton rebrand in full swing, I tuned into Four Corners the other week. Turned out to be a bit of a flirt piece.
No, you said you wanted a flirt piece.
While Dutton did his best to project a kinder, gentler Spud,
Crack into a smile or a joke or whatever.
he also let rip with what is one of my all-time favourite politician humble brags.
I did work hard, and I bought my first house at 19 or 20 or something like that.
What a trooper.
Fun fact.
Here's a fun fact. Did you know that Peter Dutton is just over a month younger, yeah that's right, younger than Matt Damon?
Matt Damon.
I'm not sure about you, but I'm always a big fan of hearing politicians talk about their home buying experiences back in the 80s.
First house I bought cost me $67,000. Now,
Jesus, Barnaby, I don't know what planet you're on, but you're looking at $600,000 now, and that's on a good day, fair income.
It's
good news, everybody, because Barnaby bought a cheap house a long time ago. Your
life's
sweet.
made.
Their experiences in the good old days are highly relevant to what a 19-year-old is likely to experience today.
I want kids to be able to buy their first house at 19 or 20 if they've worked hard. That is an increasingly difficult dream for a lot of Australians.
The impossible dream.
An increasingly difficult dream. No shit. After 9 years of the coalition government, that dream has moved well beyond an increasingly difficult one, and more like one of those dreams where you end up riding a unicorn that poops ice cream. Has buying a home at 18 to 20 actually been possible at any time in the last 30 years? I mean, without a healthy financial contribution from the bank of mum and dad, that is. Let's take a look at how difficult it would be for a 20-year-old to live the Dutton dream with some dodgy pickles maths. Under 20s are not traditionally your high-income earners. According to one study, the average salary for the under 20s is just over $380 per week. For the purposes of this exercise though, let's assume
ass out of you and me.
Let's assume our hypothetical 20-year-old gets paid $28 per hour, which is above minimum wage, and works a 38-hour week. That means they're making a touch over $1,000 a week, or about $55,000 per year before tax. By the time the taxman takes his cut though, the annual take-home pay is around $45,000. Now let's look at property values in Melbourne. As of the June 22 quarter, the ABS report that the mean property value in Melbourne is almost $940,000. Okay, let's take a chunk off that, and our hypothetical 20-year-old finds a place for $700,000.
It's a real bargain.
Now let's assume our 20-year-old has managed to save every cent of the $45,000 that they're earning per year, and they've worked for 2 years full time. That means they've got $90,000 in the bank. Plugging that into the ANZ home deposit calculator, well, essentially our hypothetical 20-year-old is screwed. The bulk of their $90,000 will go to upfront costs, leaving an actual deposit of around $37,500. That means they'll need to borrow over $660,000. Now let's plug that into a home loan repayment calculator.
Oh my!
The monthly loan repayments come to $3,737 per month, remembering that our hypothetical 20-year-old makes $3,814 per month.
Good news.
Our hypothetical 20-year-old can make their loan repayments. The bad news, well, they need to figure out how to survive on $77 for the month.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Maybe it was possible for 19 and 20-year-olds to get into the property market by themselves at some point in history. It's just not something that's been remotely realistic in my living memory.
Peter Dutton has built his own wealth in real estate. In the past 30 years, he's wholly or partly owned and sold at least 21 properties in Queensland, including childcare and shopping centres, and a $6 million home in part of the Gold Coast known as Millionaire's Row. He currently owns a $3 million Brisbane luxury apartment and a cattle farm.
You are a very wealthy individual. You don't talk about that much.
Well, first point, I think that's overstated.
Why? Why?
Well, because I think people make all sorts of assumptions about assets you've got, don't take into account the mortgages that you might have, or so people make those assumptions. But I did work hard, and I bought my first house at 19 or 20 or something like that, and I was able to invest in shares and renovate houses.
Watching Dutton squirm when he's described as wealthy, realising that that's really not going to play that well with
The forgotten Australians.
That was priceless.
The fact that he's a millionaire yet rejects the wealthy tag is not the mark of a guy in touch with the common folk.
The unwashed masses.
He might reject the tag, but Spud definitely meets my definition of wealthy. Based on his register of interests, Dutton's been buying and selling property like he's been doing the rounds of a monopoly board.
So play Monopoly. Do not pass go. Go directly to McDonald's.
Dutton's property portfolio has attracted attention in the past. His interests in childcare centres have caught media attention a couple of times in his political career. There was also that time where he had a memory failure and he forgot to declare $1 million commercial property. I mean, hands up, who among us hasn't forgotten they owned $1 million property at least once in our lives?
Bueller.
There's no doubt Dutton has been active in the property market. But when you're handed the directorship of the family trust at the age of 22, you can hardly describe yourself as a self-made man. Can you? Let's go back to his humble brag.
I grew up in a working class suburb. My parents worked hard for every dollar and we weren't financially well off. I started part-time work in a butcher shop after school and until I started university. I saved and bought a house at 19.
Oh, humble brag, humble brag, humble brag.
He's quite fond of rolling that one out, so let's apply some basic pickle maths.
Not again.
Because even going back over 30 years, I still find it hard to imagine how a kid working after school jobs can afford to buy their own home without some sort of generous assistance. Here are some numbers from 1990. The minimum wage was $5.64 an hour. The average home loan interest rate was a whopping 17%. Apparently, Dutton paid $93,000 for his first home. That converts to around $211,000 by today's standards, according to this calculator anyway. Hypothetical home loan calculation time. It's 1990 and you're buying your first property. It's going to cost you $93,000. You're working an after-school job, let's say at a bakery. You're earning a minimum wage of $5.64 an hour. You go to the bank and you ask for a loan. Even though you're still either at school or uni, the bank manager must be feeling generous that day and agrees to lend you $93,000 on a 17% interest rate over 30 years. The weekly repayments will come in at $306 per week. I know that sounds pretty reasonable, but in order to meet those weekly repayments, you need to work a minimum of 54 hours per week, more by the time you factor in tax. 54 hours a week. Sure, no worries. Can probably even squeeze in some time to run for state government as well.
The state's youngest candidate is 18-year-old Liberal Peter Dutton.
Peter Dutton cut his political baby teeth in 1989, when as a fresh-faced young Liberal he put his hand up to run in the Queensland election.
There's always a lot of gaslighting from politicians when it comes to first home buyers entering the market, almost always phrased by their own experiences in the 80s or early 90s. They were buying at a time where investment buying was far less of a thing, and prices weren't being pushed up at the same rate because of that. While millionaires like Peter Dutton were able to get into the market in the 80s and early 90s with very little investor competition, as a first home buyer today, you're just as likely to rock up to an auction and get blown away by a boomer picking up their fourth investment property, reaping the benefits of being able to get a foot in the door 30 years earlier. The reality is you've got about as much chance of seeing that ice cream pooping unicorn as you do seeing a self-funded 19-year-old entering the property market at the moment. So Dutton's dream isn't so much a dream, it's an absolute
Fantasy world.
Speaking of investments, I wonder what Dutton's advice would be on whether or not to invest in oceanfront property at the moment.
I think we had a bit of that up in Port Moresby.
Oh yeah. Anyway, it was a good meeting.
Where was it? Moresby? Yeah. Time doesn't mean anything when you're about to be, have water lapping at your hands.
That never gets old.
I want people to make judgments on what they see, not what they, believe from some of the media interpretation or some of the online, trolling and commentary.
Trolls.
I've made some, some poor taste jokes like any person over the years.
Water lapping at your hands.